space. And with stereophonic recording, the feeling of space and perspective is brought to you.
Hello and welcome to another album review on this channel. My name is Josh, and for today's album review, I am going to be reviewing the album Damaged by the band Black Flag. Black Flag is a hardcore punk band from Hermosa Beach, California. The band was formed in 1976 under the name of Panic by Keith Morris, Greg Ginn, and Raymond Pettibon. The band had gone through multiple lineup changes throughout its existence, with Greg Ginn being the only member to never leave the band. In 1977, Chuck Dukolsky joined the band as the bassist after his previous band, Worm, broke up. In 1978, the band changed their name from Panic to Black Flag because they discovered that there is another band using the name Panic. In the summer of 1978, Roberto Valverde joined the band as the drummer and was given the nickname of Robo by the other members of Black Flag because of his stiff, robotic-like drum playing style that primarily relied on arm movement rather than the traditional wrist movement that most drummers utilize. In the summer of 1980, Des Cadena joined the band as the lead singer, but later would become the full-time rhythm guitarist after Henry Rollins joined the band. In the summer of 1981, Henry Rollins joined the band as the lead singer after his previous band, State of Alert, broke up. The band existed from 1976 to 1986 when they broke up, but in 2003, the band reunited to play 3 reunion shows. In 2013, the band reunited again, and this time they released their 7th studio album, What The?, which was poorly received by critics and fans. In 2014, the band went on hiatus, with multiple members leaving the band. And finally, in 2019, the band reformed again and are still currently playing today. Black Flag's music was inspired by bands like The Ramones, The Stooges, MC5, and Black Sabbath. This band is widely considered to be one of the first hardcore punk bands, as well as one of the pioneers of the post-hardcore genre. The band's music features elements of hardcore punk, post-hardcore, sludge metal, heavy metal, free jazz, blues, math rock, and instrumental music. They've released 7 studio albums, with their latest studio album, What The?, being released in 2013. But the album I'm reviewing today is called Damaged, which was their debut studio album. This album was released on December 5th, 1981. The label that this album was released under was SST Records. SST Records was formed in 1978 by Greg Ginn of Black Flag, and their first record was Black Flag's debut EP, Nervous Breakdown, which was released in January of 1979. The label has released records from bands such as The Minutemen, Husker Du, Meat Puppets, Soundgarden, Sonic Youth, and Dinosaur Jr., among others. The producers for this album include Spot and Black Flag. Spot is an American producer who was the house producer and engineer for SST Records and was a former bassist in the band Panic, which later became Black Flag before Chuck Dukolsky joined. He produced the first 4 Black Flag studio albums, and he also produced albums for bands like Minutemen, Meat Puppets, Descendants, Misfits, and Husker Du. The members of the band on this album include Henry Rollins, who was the lead vocalist, Greg Ginn, who is the lead guitarist. He also provides backing vocals on this album. You have Des Cadena, who is the rhythm guitarist, and he also provides backing vocals. You have Chuck Dukulski, he is the bassist, and he also provides backing vocals. And then Robo, who is the drummer, and he also provides backing vocals on this album. There are 5 singles released for this album. These are Thirsty and Miserable, Life of Pain, Six Pack, Damage 1, and TV Party. The genre of this album is hardcore punk, and this album was very positively reviewed. AllMusic gave it 5 out of 5. Pitchfork gave it 9.2 out of 10. They also ranked it as number 25 on their top 100 albums of the 80s. Rolling Stone gave this album 4.5 out of 5, and they ranked it number 340 on their list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. Spin Magazine gave it 10 out of 10. And also Kurt Cobain of Nirvana listed this album in his top 50 albums of all time. This album was produced, recorded, and mixed at Unicorn Studios in West Hollywood, California. Now I'm going to talk about each song on this album, give my thoughts on each song. Then after that, I'm going to talk about my top 3 songs on this album, give some overall thoughts on the album, and then give you my rating. But first, I want to talk about each song on this album. The first song on this album is called Rise Above. This was written by Greg Ginn, and I thought this song was a really great opener for this album. I thought this was an amazing song. Right away, you can tell what you're signed up for with this album. I really enjoyed the intro guitar riff in the beginning. It was really catchy with a lot of energy. And this is your classic hardcore punk song. If you ever wondered what hardcore punk is as a genre, this is probably the best song to just listen to. It has all the main features of the genre. It's super fast, lots of energy, lots of aggression, angry, that punk energy to it throughout. You have Henry Rollins singing the lead, which Henry Rollins has so much energy in his voice. He has such an aggressive voice. It fits so well with this aggressive instrumentation on this song. I like how in this song they do that classic call and response that's famous in punk music, where you have Henry Rollins singing the lead, and then you have the rest of the band coming in and providing backing vocals as a response to what he's singing. I really like the guitar solo in this song. It's really short, but has that classic, chaotic, punk sound to it that I think perfectly fits this song. The rhythm section on this song is really well done by the drums and the bass and the rhythm guitar. I think they all sound really great together on this song. I really like the way that they transitioned from the intro to the verse. I thought that was very smooth, and this is a very easy song to just headbang to, just because the rhythm is just so catchy and it's just a drive throughout. I also really like the lyrics of the song. They're very simple, straightforward, aggressive, angry, and that hardcore punk style, which is what you want out of a punk song. This type of music is kind of expressive when you're maybe angry or you just want to get out that emotion. I feel like this is the perfect song for that. The message of this song is kind of that hardcore punk anthem where it's like, I'm not gonna do what I'm told, fuck society, rise above all the bullshit. This type of message is what is at the core of the hardcore punk movement at this time in the early 80s. And overall, I think this was a really great start to this album, and personally is one of the best album openers I've heard. I think a really good album opener should set the mood and the theme for what you're going to listen throughout this album, and I feel like this song did a great job of doing that. It really established what you're going to get out of this album and what the hardcore punk genre is really about. The second song on this album is called Spray Paint. This was written by Chuck Dukowski and Greg Ginn, and I really love this song. This is only a 30-second long song, but it's 30 seconds of just pure punk rock energy. Even though this is the shortest song on this album, it's one of my favorite songs on this album because it has everything that I want out of a punk rock song, hardcore punk song. It's super fast, aggressive, mad. The instrumentation is also really catchy, and Henry's singing in this song is even more energetic than it was on the first song, Rise Above. It's super dark and loud and just pure emotion coming out of his voice. And the lyrics are basically about anarchy and just, having freedom, how it feels to be free, and a lot of the same, punk rock themes that you find throughout this album you could find in the lyrics of this song. So overall, I really enjoyed this song. Even though it's really short, I feel like it does a great job of picking up where Rise Above left off with that same energy and just keeping this train going. So I really enjoyed that song a lot. The third song on this album is called Six Pack. This is the first single to appear on this album so far, and this was written by Greg Ginn. The song was originally sung by Des Cadena, who was the lead vocalist before Henry Rollins joined the band, and this version was released on the Six Pack EP/single, which was released 5 months before this album. But the vocals that you hear on this album version are performed by Henry Rollins. And honestly, I didn't really like this song that much, especially coming off the last two songs with just so much energy and this pure, hardcore punk sound to it. The intro sounded really flat to me. It was really slow, and for a song that's only a little bit over 2 minutes long, I feel like the intro you could cut out that part. It just took too long to actually get to the meat of the song, especially for a hardcore punk album. The drums and the bass didn't seem to be playing together on time during the intro. If they were on time, something sounded off. I don't exactly know, but yeah, I just wasn't really enjoying this intro at all. And then when the actual, instrumentation came in from the hardcore punk sound, I was just kind of bored. It had that standard hardcore punk formula to it. And I feel like the last two songs did some catchy instrumentation choices that really, excited my ears and got me really interested. This song had more of that standard kind of traditional run-of-the-mill hardcore punk sound to it, so it didn't really hit the same as the last two songs. Lyrically, this is a comedy song, and especially compared to the last two songs, which were much more serious about anarchy and kind of rising above all the bullshit. This song is basically about how much they love 6 packs of beer and it's the best thing in the world. You can kind of take the lyrics as possibly being satirical, but overall I wasn't really impressed with these lyrics. They're fine, but I feel like when you have Henry Rollins as your lead vocalist, he just works so much better in the more like angry, aggressive style of punk music. And I don't really mind these fun comedy punk songs. Kind of remind me of a song in the style of a band like The Descendants or even Dead Kennedys, who did more comedic style punk songs mixed in with their more aggressive stuff. But I just don't like the instrumentation on this song, and I feel like this song overall just didn't work for me at all, so I wasn't a big fan of this song. The fourth song on this album is called What I See. This is written by Chuck Dukowski, and I wasn't a fan of this song either, honestly. In this song, Henry Rollins is doing more of a spoken word performance, which he went on in his career to become a spoken word artist, so that kind of makes sense. But the instrumentation just felt really clunky sounding, and I feel like him doing the spoken word over the instrumentation really let the instrumentation really shine out, so you're not really focused on his lyrics because they're more chill and laid back. And I felt like the instrumentation was kind of in the forefront and just sounded clunky to me. The song is driven by the bass playing by Chuck Dukowski, which makes sense because he wrote this song. But I wasn't really a big fan of the bass line in this song. Something felt off with the rhythm overall, similar to the last song. And I don't mind the spoken word type singing style that Henry Rollins is doing in this song. His singing kind of reminds me of Mike Murr from Suicidal Tendencies, that has that kind of like hip hop feel to it, kind of the talky, preachy feel. So I don't really mind that. I think sometimes that can actually be kind of cool, but just didn't work well over this instrumentation. And I like the lyrics to the song. He's singing about depression and this internal conflict of wanting to live while simultaneously wishing you were dead. So it's getting more back to the serious themes that the first two songs had, coming off of the last song, Six Pack, which was more of a comedy song. So overall, like I said, I wasn't a big fan of this song. I liked it better than the Six Pack song. At least I liked that the message and the lyrics I felt fit Henry Rollins' style better. And I didn't really mind his spoken word performance, I just didn't like it over this instrumentation. The fifth song on this album is called TV Party. This is the second single to appear on this album, and this is written by Greg Ginn. I like this song. It's another fun comedy punk song, kind of in the style of Six Pack, but I like the comedy in this song better, and I feel like the instrumentation was just much more catchy in this song than it was in Six Pack. Basically, it's just a song about how much they love watching TV and drinking beer together, but it has more of a satirical twist to it. This instrumentation actually had more of a classic punk feel to it, in the style of 70s bands like the Ramones and the Damned. So it had less of that hardcore punk, super aggressive feel, and it had more of that classic kind of fun punk feel to it. I really enjoyed the singing style in this song because it really felt like the background vocals were kind of the lead vocals, with the rest of the band really leading the kind of chanting chorus, while the lead vocals with Henry Rollins kind of took more of a back seat. So I thought that was kind of a cool dichotomy and switch from the normal formula that Black Flag has been using so far. Lyrically, like I mentioned, this is a satirical comedy song about how much people were addicted to watching TV all day during the 1980s, which is kind of funny because today, people watch TV even more than they did back then with all the streaming platforms. So it's still a relevant song today, honestly. During the song, there's a lot of references to different TV shows during that period, like That's Incredible, Hill Street Blues, Dallas, Fridays, Saturday Night Live, Monday Night Football, The Jeffersons, and Vegas. These are all TV shows that they referenced during this song, which I thought was kind of cool because it kind of takes you back to that era of TV. And then I like the comedic turn in this song that near the end you find out that they broke the TV and the TV's broken, they can't have their TV party anymore. And overall, I thought that was just a really clever concept, and I actually really like this song. It has that same comedic stuff that I didn't really, like as much in Six Pack, but I felt like they did it better here. The instrumentation was better. The singing style was switched up, so Henry Rollins wasn't right in the center, which I think was a great decision because I feel like Henry Rollins doesn't really sell the comedy that well. So when you're having him be more of a background, I think it just worked better. And overall, I thought this was a good song. The sixth song on this album is called Thirsty and Miserable. This is the third single to appear on this album, and this was written by Des Cadena, Robo, and Rosa Medea. And Rosa Medea was Greg Ginn's girlfriend at the time while they were making this album, so she gets writing credit on a couple of songs, including this song. And overall, I really like this song. This song goes back to the more aggressive, angry, high energy, hardcore punk sound of the first two songs. This song has a very noisy, fast, distorted tone to it throughout. Feels like a mixture between hardcore punk and a noise rock song. It has this really fuzzy, distorted 70s heavy metal vibe to it that I really enjoyed. Henry Rollins singing is just very dark, aggressive, angry, full of energy. It fits perfect with this instrumentation. Lyrically, this song is about the dark side of, being an alcoholic and how it can ruin your life. So I really like the lyrics. I feel like they fit the kind of aggressive instrumentation of the style. Kind of has that heavy metal feel to it. And especially it's interesting coming off of, a song like Six Pack, which is kind of celebrating drinking. This is kind of going to like the more negative sides of drinking, which kind of makes me realize that Six Pack was probably more satirical. This song features 2 different guitar solos. They're both really short. The first one's actually done by Des Cadena. It has this really chaotic noise rock energy to it, similar to like a Sonic Youth style. And then the second one is done by Greg Ginn, and this has more of your, thrash metal, hardcore punk sound to it. I really like both guitar solos, and I think they fit well in this song that's kind of a mixture between, a noise rock song and like a hardcore punk / thrash metal type song. So yeah, overall, I really like this song. The 7th song on this album is called Police Story. This song was written by Greg Ginn, and I thought this was a really awesome song. It feels like a continuation of the previous song, Thirsty and Miserable, because it has that same, similar style of instrumentation, very dark, aggressive, high energy, definitely a hardcore punk song. This is also a really short song, it coming in only around 1 minute and 30 seconds long. But I really feel like this short song format that they use on this song, also on the song Spray Paint from earlier in the album, it really fits this very high energy, aggressive, hardcore punk sound that they're going for. And it really creates this almost hardcore punk anthem feel to a song like this, which this song definitely has. Henry Rollins again kills his vocal performance in the song. He's even more angry, even more energy and more passion on this performance than he's had honestly on any other song on this album. And I think part of that is lyrically this song is about the corruption of police and how the police has abused and targeted the punk scene in particular at this time. And for me, this felt like basically the hardcore punk version of the song Fuck the Police by NWA, which was released 7 years later on their debut studio album Straight Outta Compton. It has that same type of energy of, police brutality and abuse towards a scene. And I feel like that energy is really expressed well through Henry Rollins' voice, because he just has a natural kind of angry, aggressive voice. And I feel like it fit this song perfectly. I really like the lyrics. I thought they were clever and really well written and very impactful, especially with all the recent, police brutality and, violence has happened, especially against black people, in the recent years, with Black Lives Matter movement and stuff. I feel like this song kind of fits that style, with just all the aggression coming out. And I feel like this is a perfect example of what the hardcore punk genre represents, where it's about sticking up to the man, to people abusing power. I feel like Black Flag really captured that rageful fuck you energy with a song like this, and overall I really enjoyed this song. The 8th song on this album is called Gimmie, Gimmie, Gimmie. This song was written by Greg Ginn. And overall, I thought this song was okay. I liked it at points, but I didn't love it really. The instrumentation on the song is very chaotic, but also it feels very basic at points. It kind of shifts between the more interesting instrumentation and the more basic, standard hardcore punk instrumentation. The rhythm section on this song felt a little bit more experimental and funky, but still had that basic punk sound to it. Again, it kind of shifted in between both of those sounds. And I think in the end, it ends up working overall. I thought the song was okay, but it does start to sound clunky at parts. So it's one of those songs I can see people, not liking and others really liking. It's kind of divisive, I think, in that way. I like how the song starts and stops again. I thought that was kind of a cool technique that they used. Probably works really well live because, you think the song is done and it comes back in. So I thought that was really clever and kind of cool. The lyrics were fine, but, they didn't really do much for me, especially coming off a Police Story, which I thought had really well written lyrics. But basically the lyrics are about, corporate America, capitalism, consumerism, kind of your basic, punk rock themes. But overall, I thought this song was pretty average. It was okay. Don't love it, don't hate it. It is what it is. The 9th song on this album is called Depression. This song was written by Greg Ginn, and I love this song. This is one of my favorite hardcore punk songs of all time. Definitely my favorite song on this album by far. It's just so much energy on this song. When you hear the song for the first time, you're just blown away by how much energy is in Henry Rollins' voice and just this band in general. I feel like they took that song Spray Paint from earlier in the album and just expanded it and added more to it and made the instrumentation even more energetic and catchy and interesting. I love the super heavy, distorted intro to the song, and it really sets this kind of like building up tone. And then the song just sucker punches you in the face with this pure energy. Henry Rollins just screaming in your ear about depression and how it's affecting him. And as someone who has depression, I feel like the lyrics were relatable, were kind of therapeutic for me because it's just like, so much aggression coming out. I think this song really represents well what the title and theme of this album is, damaged. Even the cover of this album where you have Henry Rollins punching that mirror. I feel like this song is the perfect representation for that cover. It just has so much emotion and expression in the song. The instrumentation is just so fast, it's fun, it's chaotic, it's catchy. Everything that you want in a hardcore punk song. I feel like it's impossible not to headbang to this song, to get into the rhythm and the instrumentation on the song like this. I feel like this song is a perfect example of what makes Black Flag so special and just the hardcore punk movement of the early 80s so special in general. I mean, for me, this song just has everything that I want out of a hardcore punk song. Even the solo near the end by Greg Ginn I thought was really great. And this song just really fit Henry Rollins' singing style so well. So overall, I thought this was an amazing song and my favorite song on this album. The 10th song on this album is called Room 13. This was written by Greg Ginn and Rosa Medea. And I thought this song was just okay. The guitar playing on the song is actually really interesting. There's this very eerie sounding screeching riff that's played throughout that adds a lot of chaos to the song, combined with Henry's super aggressive screaming vocals in this song. Has this very chaotic, noise rock, even like a no wave feel to it. Kind of in the same vein of a band like Sonic Youth. I felt like with a song like this, it's a really quick song. It almost feels like an interlude to this album versus just like a full song. But overall, I thought it was an okay, hardcore punk / noise rock song. The 11th song on this album is called Damaged 2, and this was written by Greg Ginn. And I like this song. This is a very angry, super aggressive hardcore punk song, similar to the Depression song and the first 2 songs on this album. Henry Rollins gives a very, his signature angry, aggressive vocal performance that I think sounds great. Lyrically, this song is about, life sucking and wanting to rot away alone and suffer alone, which is a very dark theme that kind of fits, the damage message of this song and of this album. I really like the main rhythm section during this song. Had this 70s heavy metal sound to it that reminded me a lot of the band Black Sabbath. This main section is very easy to headbang to, has a really great groove to it. This is one of those songs that just keeps going when you think it's about to stop. It keeps that groove going throughout. And this song has a more traditional hardcore punk feel to it, especially with how pissed off and angry Henry Rollins sounds throughout this song. There's a very angry and aggressive vocal performance in this song that I really enjoyed. The 12th song on this album is called No More. This is written by Chuck Dukowski, and I really enjoyed this song. It starts off with this very slow building bass and drum intro that's about a minute long. It reminded me a lot of the intro to the song Depression from earlier in the album, except this intro is even longer and more built out, and a little bit more minimal with just the bass and the drum. And then about halfway through the song, after the build up, it becomes a super energetic hardcore punk song. You have that tension release, which I really enjoy in music. And then when that hardcore punk section comes in, I really enjoyed the instrumentation during that section. Reminded me of the song Thirsty and Miserable from earlier on in the album. Henry singing in this song is very aggressive. That traditional hardcore punk singing that he's been doing throughout this album. But he also has sections where he goes into his more spoken word style singing and kind of that talk singing style, which I like, and I like that he kind of mixes up with this song. It really keeps it interesting. And I also really enjoyed the lyrics on this song. Henry Rollins is singing about how tired he is of living his sad and lonely life, how he wants to change, how he's reached a breaking point. So I thought the lyrics were really well written. The guitar playing on this song by Greg Ginn really stands out for me. I thought it was really well done. These really cool, quick riffs that he does at the end of each bar, I feel like fits with this song perfectly. And overall, I thought this was a really great song, a great Black Flag song for sure, that I really enjoyed. The 13th song on this album is called Padded Cell. This was written by Chuck Dukowski and Greg Ginn. And I really enjoyed this song a lot. Has this really quick guitar intro by Greg Ginn that reminds me of the guitar intro he does on the song Rise Above, where he's descending down the guitar neck chromatically in this kind of chaotic fashion that I think works really well for this intro. Also similar to the song Rise Above, throughout the song you have a more call and response kind of traditional punk singing style, where the rest of the band throughout the song is kind of, responding to what Henry Rollins is singing. So I thought that was really cool. This song is very quick, very aggressive, very energetic, which are the main things I want out of a hardcore punk song. And overall, I really enjoyed this song. It's a little bit kind of similar to other songs in this album, and especially with the 13th song, you're kind of getting the same type of hardcore punk sounds, and I was hoping that they would maybe switch it up and maybe do something more experimental, but I still really enjoyed this song overall. I thought it was a great, simple, hardcore punk song, and it fit really well with the vibe that this album is going for. The 14th song on this album is called Life of Pain. This is the 4th single to appear on this album, and this is written by Greg Ginn. And I really like this song. This song is clearly influenced by 70s heavy metal, and specifically Black Sabbath. That was the band I was thinking of when I was hearing this song. It has this very slow, sludge metal-like intro that's very heavy, very, in that Black Sabbath style. Then the song becomes this more traditional hardcore punk song, but has a slightly slower tempo, kind of keeps some of that same dark, heavy instrumentation from the intro. I like in this song, Henry is mostly doing his spoken word, which I think works really well over the slower kind of sludge metal instrumentation. It kind of has this, rap vibe to it, which I think actually works really well over this instrumentation. Similar to the singing style he did in like What I See from earlier in the album. I just think the instrumentation on this song works way better than it did on that song. And lyrically, Henry is basically preaching about, how terrible self-harm is, and basically it's an overall anti-suicide message. There's more to life. You can keep going. You can make it through this. So I like the message of this song. I think it's actually kind of a positive message. It's still a very dark song, obviously, and it's dealing with some heavy subject matter, but I do like the overall message to this song. And I also like how this song ends abruptly out of nowhere. A lot of times I think that is kind of weird on an album where it just ends out of nowhere, but I thought it was actually a cool effect on this song, and it kind of fit the vibe of this song really well. So overall, I really like this song. This is kind of the experimentation that I was looking for, that I kind of mentioned when I was talking about the last song, where it's like when you get this late into an album and the songs start sounding a little bit, samey. I want something that's kind of more experimental, something that's kind of different. And I feel like this song really captured that with the more, sludge metal, heavy metal, Black Sabbath vibe that I heard in this song. So the 15th and last song on this album is called Damaged One. And this is the 5th and last single to appear on this album. This was written by Greg Ginn and Henry Rollins. And this is the only song on this album written by Henry Rollins, where he gets credit for the writing. And overall, I like this song. I don't love it, but I did like this song. The whole song is basically Henry Rollins doing spoken word over this really slow, dark, heavy instrumentation. Similar to the last song, this song has this, old school hip hop feel to it that I thought sounded pretty cool, especially for the early 80s where hip hop was basically new and just coming out. I like the kind of vibe that this song has. The instrumentation on this song reminded me of like early Sonic Youth, with how chaotic and unsettling it is. It was very dark and heavy, but it had this kind of chaotic energy to it that I really enjoyed. I like that during the song, Henry sounds out of breath and exhausted, and it feels like he did, at least giving off the vibe that he's done this whole album straight live, and now he's at the last song. He's out of breath, he's kind of tired, exhausted from all the screaming he's done on this album. Now obviously it wasn't tracked live like that. They just recorded this in a separate session, but it gives off that vibe, which I feel like really helps with the flow of this album. Just you really feel like as Henry is kind of tiring down and winding down, you're winding down with this album too. So I really like that theme to this album, kind of that vibe. And lyrically in this song, a lot of it sounds improvised to me, where it's more of like a spoken word improv, where Henry is talking about how damaged he is and how tired of everything he is, basically how everyone's let him down. And throughout this song, he makes all these noises and these nonsensical lyrics, has this kind of surreal atmospheric vibe to it. And overall for me, this is a song I really enjoyed. I feel like it's a perfect ender to an album like this, where it's more atmospheric. It's more just about pure emotion and expression. Even the instrumentation feels like that, where it feels very chaotic, very improvised. They're just kind of playing random notes, and it kind of has that like I mentioned, early Sonic Youth no wave vibe to it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this song, and I thought it was a perfect way to end this album. And now that I'm done reviewing each song on this album, I'm going to talk about my top 3 songs on this album in no particular order. The first song for me is Rise Above. This is just a classic Black Flag song, probably their most popular song, and I feel like it starts the album off in the right way with just a lot of energy. Henry Rollins' vocal performance I thought was really great, and just it's the song that really represents Black Flag well to me. It's a song that represents the hardcore punk movement well, with just the lyrics, the message, that classic punk message of rising above all of the bullshit that society throws at you. And I just thought it was a perfect opener for this album. The second song for me is Spray Paint, which was the 30-second kind of, energetic song that just really flowed off really well off of Rise Above, in my opinion. Even though the song is the shortest song on this album, it's just pure energy, and I feel like that is what they were going for with this album, and with the hardcore punk, genre in general. With this genre, they were trying to separate themselves from, the Ramones, the Clash, the Damned of the 70s, and just add way more energy to it. Add more screaming, make the songs faster, play as fast as you can, and just super expressive. And I feel like this is, in some ways, the perfect song for the hardcore punk genre, because it's super short and it's just super catchy and it's just super aggressive, and you have that angry energy throughout. So I really enjoyed this song. And the third song for me is Depression. Like I mentioned, this is my favorite hardcore punk song of all time. It just has everything I want out of a hardcore punk song. It just gets better every time I listen to it. Just so much energy and aggression from Henry Rollins. Probably his best vocal performance on this album. You can really feel just the emotion coming through his voice on this song. And, just everything about this song just works really well. So those are my top 3 songs on this album. Again, Rise Above, Spray Paint, and Depression. Now I'm going to talk about some of my overall thoughts I had on this album. First thought I had was just how impressed I was with Henry Rollins' vocal performance. I had never listened to a Black Flag album before, so I've only heard Henry Rollins, occasionally, maybe in like video game soundtracks and stuff, occasional Black Flag song. So when I was listening to this album, I was just super impressed by Henry Rollins' vocal performance, just how much energy he had. He was only 20 years old when they made this album, and that really blows my mind, because he's so good at 20 years old at just having so much energy and aggression. His singing voice actually isn't bad. It's not like a band or even a genre where singing on key and doing all that stuff is super important, but his voice sounded good, and it was just super aggressive and energetic. I also like that he switched up and did more of that spoken word style, which I feel like also kind of separates him from a lot of the other hardcore punk and punk vocalists of that time. He can go into the more poetry, spoken word style, and it clashes up really well with the more slower instrumentation. So I was just really impressed with his vocal performance overall on this album. Another thought I had when listening to this album was just how ahead of the time this album sounded. This is a classic hardcore punk album for a reason. There's a reason why it gets so much praise from critics and fans, and it's really considered one of the first albums of that hardcore punk scene in the early 80s. It really set the standard for the genre, with its aggression, its speed, lyrical subject matter, quick songs, catchy instrumentation, the guitar solos, the super quick guitar solos by Greg Ginn throughout this album, even the influences from the Black Sabbath's, Deep Purple's, that super sludgy metal feel to it. This album's just so influential for the genres that come after it, the indie rock genre, alternative rock, sludge metal, the whole grunge scene of the 90s, with bands like Mudhoney, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Dinosaur Jr. You can feel how this album influenced bands like Suicidal Tendencies. I heard a lot of Mike Murr style singing in this song, especially during the spoken word sections from Henry Rollins. And you can see how influential Henry was on a lot of the singers during those times. Bands like the Melvins with the more sludge metal, you can hear the influences in some of these songs of that kind of sludge metal genre that the Melvins really popularized. So overall, I was just really impressed by how ahead of the time this album sounded, and you can really hear how influential this album was for all those genres that would really rise up during the later 80s and going into the 90s. And my last kind of thought I had with this album, and this is more of a nitpick, but it's one of the things that I noticed when I was listening to this album, and I feel like it would have made the album better if they just cut a couple songs, because this album's 15 songs. It's only about 35 minutes, so it's not even a long album at all. It doesn't necessarily feel bloated, but I feel like a couple of these songs, if they cut them and just made the album more concise and just all killer, no filler, I think the album would work a lot better. A song like Six Pack, I think it works with certain bands like the Descendants, where they're going into more comedy and kind of that skate punk genre. But for a band like this, when it's called Damaged, and a lot of these songs are dealing with depression and suicide and alcoholism, to have a song like Six Pack, it just felt out of place. And I know this was an earlier song that they wrote prior to Henry Rollins joining the band, and I know he made this band a lot more serious and dealing with more political messages and more of aggressive tone. Well, some of the earlier stuff before this album was more comedic, kind of in that like I mentioned, Descendants vibe, but I just feel like, you can leave a song like this off the album. It doesn't have to be on here, especially because this song is also already released on an EP from earlier. You didn't need to include a song like this. And there's a couple other songs too that felt kind of samey for me on this album. Again, this is kind of a nitpick, but I just felt like when I was listening to this, at points I was kind of losing the theme of this album and just didn't flow perfectly for me. But again, that's more of a nitpick. And now I'm going to give my overall rating for this album. I give this album 4 out of 5. I thought this was a really great album. It's a classic hardcore punk album, and from the first song on this album, Rise Above, you know what you're in for. Lots of energy, fast tempo, noisy punk music that just feels different from the traditional punk sounds of like the Clash and the Damned, even the Sex Pistols from the 70s. This is much more aggressive and energetic and faster than the music from those bands. So I totally understand why it's so well regarded and why it's so influential for so many other bands, especially during the time. I think part of what hurts this album a little bit is I'm listening to this the first time in 2022. At this time, if I was listening to this in 1981, I probably would have been super blown away from this album because it was just so ahead of this time. But now, after all the different punk albums I've listened to and all the different alternative rock albums, especially from the 90s that I've listened to, there's aspects of this album that don't click with me totally. But still, overall, I thought this was a great album. I enjoyed most of the songs on this album. And I think this is a great album to start with when you're trying to get into the hardcore punk genre, which I'm doing because, I like some hardcore punk songs, but I'm not really into that genre, especially the early 80s version of a hardcore punk genre. So for me, this being my first album I've listened to fully in that genre, I thought this was a great start to what to expect. Henry Rollins' vocal performance I thought was great. It's probably my favorite part of this album. And I really enjoyed the instrumentation. It was really catchy, especially Greg Ginn's guitar playing. I thought was really well done this album. Also, Greg Ginn's songwriting abilities. I didn't really talk about it, but most of these songs was written by Greg Ginn. So you can really hear how influential he was in the making of this album. But, my main complaint is just a lot of these songs sound too similar to each other, kind of interrupts the flow of this album. And then a couple of the songs I just felt didn't fit the theme of this album. Some other songs too, I felt were kind of boring. Just they didn't really excite me that much. But overall, still, I thought this was a great album, and I would recommend it to fans of punk music or people who are just trying to get into hardcore punk music or just want to hear the origins of that genre and just see how influential Black Flag was for so many bands to go forward. And now I'm going to talk about who I would recommend this album for. This is where I mentioned some bands and artists that I feel like if you're fans of these artists, you'll probably enjoy this album, just to help people, see if this is an album for them. They could see, if you're a fan of this band or music similar to, these artists, then you probably would enjoy this album. So first, I would recommend this album to people who are fans of more classic artists from around the time period that this album came out, like Dead Kennedys, The Descendants, Bad Brains, Minor Threat, Adolescents, and Circle Jerks. These are bands that I feel like, have similar sounds to the sounds you'd hear on this album. And if you're a fan of these bands and the music they make, you'll probably find at least something in this album that you would enjoy, at least in my opinion. I would also recommend this album to people who are fans of more modern artists like Turnstile, Soul Glow, Painted Black, Nightbirds, War on Women, and Rough Francis. To me, these are more modern bands that I feel like you can hear how influential this album was for those bands. And, if you're a fan of those bands, you'll probably be able to enjoy and appreciate, the origins of the hardcore punk genre, which you can hear in this album. And that does it for this review of the album Damaged by Black Flag. I want to thank everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed this review and have a great day. Peace out.
In nature, sounds exist in space.